Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second Upskilling Forum hosted by the Office of Employer Initiatives at the Texas Workforce Commission. My name is Thomas Walker, Program Specialist for the Office of Employer Initiatives. As a couple of administrative items before we begin. Your microphones are muted. There is a chat function where you can enter questions, which we will address time permitting. We would also ask that you turn off your camera if you are not a panelist to preserve bandwidth on the webinar. Finally, we remind you that this forum will be recorded, and as such, it is subject to the Texas Government Code Chapter 552, the state's open records laws. Our moderator today will be Seth Green, the Skills Development Fund Outreach Specialist for North Central Texas and Texoma. Seth Green.
Thank you, Thomas. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Seth Green with the Office of Employer Initiatives. I represent the Skills Development Fund for North Central Texas, which includes the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and the surrounding area up to the Oklahoma border. Let's begin today by welcoming our longest tenured commissioner, Julian Alvarez, our commissioner representing labor, with some opening remarks. Commissioner?
Thank you, Seth. It's hard to believe that a commissioner that's only been here 4 years is the senior commissioner, right? So I never thought I'd ever title myself in that respect. Hey, so I just wanted to congratulate Dale and his team for putting this together. I mean, how valuable it is for Dale and his team to continue having dialogue with the EDCs, our community colleges, the small business owners around the state. So Dale, I applaud you and your team for the great work that you continue to do and for working so closely with the commissioners when we talk about upskilling. And you couldn't have picked a better topic to discuss than upskilling, especially in the medical field. I mean, I have the experts that are here serving. I mean, you know, Miss Forrester, who represents Grayson County College, I mean, on the receiving end of great skills grants and other opportunities through the agency. And of course, Mr. Moore and Thomas. I've known Thomas and what he's done in the past. I followed Thomas in his career. And then, of course, a good friend of mine, Dr. Daniel King, who now represents and works for the hospital down in South Texas, the Doctors Hospital Renaissance. So really, I just wanted to congratulate all of you. Dale, I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge the accomplishments that you made and to continue having this type of dialogue with folks around the state. You know, what I love about what Dale and his team have done is been able to work with employers and people like yourselves who are serving on the panel and coming up with ways that we could use and fully use and spend the money that we have been allocated, whether it's through the Department of Labor or its other initiatives or other types of funding. Dale and his team have done a really good job of distributing the money. He literally has elevated the program, the Office of Employer Initiatives program, to the next level. And that was hard to do. I mean, he was working with a great commissioner, Commissioner Aaron Demerson, who did a great job. And I think he set the foundation. But Dale, we're real proud of you and the work you do. This panel that you've put together, I look forward to hearing from them. As you know, our main focus right now is to continue looking at ways to upskill our current workforce staff and our current workforce period around the state. And as you know, the healthcare industry certainly is one of our most demanding occupations. A few of them are listed in the top 25 when we talk about the most demanding occupations in the state of Texas. You know, one of the things that I was really impressed with was the panelists here all understand the value of CTE, community colleges, options that young individuals have in the general public. You all have looked at ways to provide services to individuals that have barriers. One that stands out, and some of the things that I've seen that some of you have worked on and some of the discussions that I've heard that you all have had are talking about the digital divide. How are we continuing to serve those individuals that have a difficulty in completing that certification or that degree because they don't have access to internet connectivity? We appreciate all the work that all of you have done, not only in your professional careers, but also during the opportunities that you've had to address folks around the state. Let me tell you, there are lots of occupations out there that require, you know, more than a high school, but less than a 4-year degree. And many of you are on the same page when we talk about the value of community colleges, technical schools, and the work that you all do. And thank you for working with one another. The fact that you all, one of the things that Texas takes pride in is when we get to go and travel other states. I mean, the relationships that we have with the small industry or small business owners, the community colleges, the economic development partners around the state. It's amazing when we talk to other folks around the state of Texas, even prior to COVID-19, and what we can do in relationships that we've established. The governor's 2016 charge by putting us, TEA, and higher ed together to work together and create, where he charged us with working with various different groups, focusing on industry needs. That was amazing. You've seen apprenticeship programs that have now expanded into other fields. We have an registered apprenticeship program here at St. David's with RNs. We have a program in South Texas that South Texas College and South Texas and Texas Southmost College have been working on for many years, and of course TSTC. But the one that comes to mind is the apprenticeship program for transitioning veterans that want to learn how to make beer. I mean, this is just amazing what Texans do, and really it couldn't have been achieved without the folks that we have online. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you, Dale, the folks that we have here on the phone with us today, or that are participating in the Zoom meeting. Congratulations to you and everyone else. Texas Workforce Commission is here to support the efforts of everyone that's joining us today. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you all for joining us today. Our objective in hosting these forums is to provide our partners with some concrete ideas regarding upskilling and reskilling workers throughout Texas, helping them to get back to work and ultimately aiding in the economic development of our state in the wake of the COVID pandemic. We have a well-rounded panel of healthcare and bioscience experts with us today. Our webinar will cover several issues facing healthcare and bioscience in Texas right now, from new trends to policy to training needs to challenges and solutions. Our panelists in alphabetical order are Dewana Forrester, Executive Director of the Center for Workplace Learning at Grayson College, Dr. Daniel King with DHR Health, Thomas Kowalski, President and CEO of the Texas Texas Healthcare and Bioscience Institute, and Michael Moore, Vice President of Partner Development at the Practice Management Institute. And panelists, if you haven't already, please go ahead and switch on your microphones and cameras. I'd like to begin with our panelists giving 2 or 3 minute introductions of themselves. Just a short little introduction of yourself and your organization. And again, we'll go in alphabetical order. So Dewana.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I am Executive Director of the Center for Workplace Learning at Grayson College. The CWL is the overarching non-credit instructional unit for the college, and we serve our region through a variety of workforce preparation and certificate industry certification training programs. We also do customized workforce training, the HSE, which is the same as a GED program. We offer ESL and mandatory professional development. So we also have trending community interest, like our youth summer programs and teams, which is our educationally active mature adults. As part of that role, I also oversight all of the skills development programs. And so between my time at Grayson in the last 5 years and my prior 15 years at North Central Texas College, I've been involved in preparation and implementation of about $10 million in skills development funds.
Thank you, Dewana. Let's see here. Dr. King, go ahead. Introduce yourself if you would, please.
Yes, Daniel King. I oversee or help to oversee all of the educational and employee training activities of Doctors Hospital at Renaissance, located in Edinburgh. Doctors Hospital is the largest hospital in South Texas, with a hospital with over 500 beds, and also operates more than 70 clinics all across South Texas, from Brownsville to Laredo. It's a hospital that has many specialties, has centers of excellence, offers quality of care in a variety of specialties that previously were unavailable south of San Antonio. Continue to grow and expand, and of course, taking on this current challenge of the issues that we're all facing today with the COVID-19.
Thanks, sir. Tom, go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Kowalski. I'm the president and CEO of the Texas Healthcare and Bioscience Institute. Its acronym is THBI. You may have heard of us. We are the trade association for the life science industry in the state of Texas. We were created 24 years ago. When we opened our doors as an institute, we counted 500 biotech life science companies in the state of Texas. We're proud to report today we have over 6,000 companies employing 100,000 folks from around the state, creating products that we can get to patients as quickly as possible. Also, as we're a membership organization, we have biopharmaceutical companies, research institutions, medical device companies, chambers of commerces, economic development. We also have, as part of our network, groups like BioHouston, Biomed SA, which is in San Antonio, Bio El Paso Juarez, Bio Austin, and Bio North Texas, which covers the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. So all in all, our network touches about 1,000 companies and entities out of the 6,000 companies that are here in the state. It is a growing industry, and of course today, during the pandemic, all eyes are on the life science industry, and workforce plays a very, very critical role, which I know we're going to talk about here very shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And Michael, go ahead and introduce yourself if you would, please.
Well, I want to thank TWC for allowing Practice Management Institute to be a part of this issue. PMI is the leading provider nationally of practice-based training. We are an entity that provides training to help lift up physicians in private practice. And this is a very crucial time for physicians in private practice right now. I'm not sure what's going on. Seth, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, we are a leading provider of practice-based education, and everything that we do is non-clinical in nature. Everything we do is geared to lifting up physicians in private practice. And while we have a national footprint, we bring to the table education, the A to the Z, that takes care of doctors who need training. Their staff needs training on a regular basis, year in and year out, to be able to run profitable and compliant, successful businesses. And we're happy to be at this table. We are headquartered in San Antonio. We partner with most hospital organizations in the state of Texas, and are proud now of our college partnerships, because the education that we do is not lengthy. It's immediate. It's 3 to 6 hour and certification programs that help physicians be successful. And with the onset of COVID, our providers in private practice are suffering right now. So we're happy to be a part of the solution in the state.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, well, let's jump right into the panel discussion. Some of these questions are going to be for a couple of you individually. Some will be for the whole panel. Just bear that in mind as we move forward. But I'd like to start with Dr. King and Tom. The first question is, from a policy and practice standpoint, what's the biggest immediate challenge facing healthcare in the biosciences sector? And how can training providers and staffing recruiters address these challenges right now for the greatest benefit of healthcare and biosciences?
Dr. King, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and open it up. Yeah, from the healthcare side, several things. There's an ongoing need for safety protocol training and continuing to upgrade this. Obviously, the COVID situation has changed the entire way we operated, and there's a need to continue to have more individuals trained in that. In addition, there's a need to upskill LVNs, medical assistants, patient care technicians, a lot of the bedside help, to kind of take some of the load off the RNs. There's a shortage of nurses. We're all dealing with a shortage of nurses. And of course, the nurses and patient care individuals are, subject to becoming ill and being cycled out of the workforce. And there's a need for some of the next level staff to kind of step up and pick up as much of the load as their license allows. And so a lot of upskilling and retraining on those individuals is important as well.
So from the industry standpoint, there's pre-COVID, and now we're in the pandemic itself. And so I think one of the first things that we were very concerned about was shelter in place rules that were being broadcast across the state. It was very important for our researchers and their teams to be able to access their laboratories. And I think shelter in place is still going to be extremely critical. And obviously, the county judges, the mayors, we work very closely in terms of coming up with language that would allow our researchers and their teams to access labs. I think keeping their own employees safe, you have to remember from a life science standpoint, from a bench to the marketplace, a lot of our companies are small organizations, 3, 4, 5 people. Research is extremely critical, and keeping their employees in place was very important. I think dealing with uninterrupted travel schedules, as you know, travel has shut down, and of course our industry now has had to pivot, and Zoom and other platforms have become very, very important. The ability to reschedule clinical trials that we do a phenomenal number of clinical trials here in the state. For those of you that don't know, we're currently doing about 25,000 clinical trials. And that requires a patient to travel to a location, whether it's there in their city or they have to travel to another location and house in that location and go through the clinical trial process. So the interruptions of clinical trials to be able to bring in the COVID-related types of scheduling, and then rescheduling production timelines, looking at our manufacturing facilities that are in the process of doing that here in the state, and how do we begin to move those types of lines to make room for the COVID-related projects. And then, of course, it's going to be delivering the finished product and where those products will be delivered. We're still a bit off on that. Of course, the race is on to find a treatment for COVID. But pre-COVID, workforce was extremely critical. In fact, this next legislative session, workforce in the life sciences is something that needs to be a top priority, particularly post-COVID, as we move into an era of testing. And of course, we can't test enough. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Okay. Next one, for the whole panel. COVID has changed virtually every aspect of our lives, including healthcare. And as we consider the end of the pandemic and getting back to normal, so to speak, what changes in healthcare do you foresee remaining part of our everyday lives? So I guess let's go ahead and start with Dr. King on that one, but let's go down the whole panel list.
Well, I mean, definitely the COVID situation greatly accelerated the move to telemedicine, for example. And so every kind of medical practice imaginable moved to kind of virtual medicine for a good period of time there. Even fields like psychology, psychiatry, physical therapy found ways to move online. I think that telemedicine will continue. I can see that at the federal level and at the state level, there's undergoing rule changes on payment and things, and I think that's very important. I think it helps with efficiency and effectiveness. I think that there's been a big move towards, the negative side of crowded waiting rooms with long waits and things like that. And so using telemedicine and different kinds of scheduling and getting very creative with blended models. And I think a lot of that is likely to stay in place. And so I think a lot of that will make both the patient experience and the doctor experience better in the future as everybody adjusts into that.
Thanks. Luana, what do you think?
I think that we're going to have, as an offset of this, some emerging occupations, particularly at the base level, where we have to start looking at what types of jobs have been created out of a need to move forward progressively. I think also there's going to be a big swing towards a lot of transferable skills and people being cross-trained with the intent that these health offices have to be covered and people have to understand how to use the technology to help them while also protecting their patients and their own safety. And so I think there will be some changes that have happened that will become part of the new norm. as we move forward, that people will realize that they were successful ventures, and that you know, they will just continue using those type of tactics to serve, particularly in the rural most area. Some of the people that have a hard time making it into the doctor's office, and have found that it's been very gainful to be able to have that same conversation in a face-to-face arena through Zoom as they did if they were sitting in the doctor's office. And so I think there'll be some very interesting tactics parlayed as part of this.
Okay. Michael, what do you think?
Well, I want to agree with both of them. You know, telemedicine in the independent practice is not anything new, but now it's a necessity to keeping doors open. Private practices all over the country, including in the state, were hit hard by COVID, and telemedicine has allowed them to actually maintain some degree of operation. Many practices have let staff go, and they're relying on these interactive virtual visits to keep their doors open. And so I want to say telemedicine. It's great for patients who, you know, are remote or have to drive in when they're not feeling their best to get quality patient care. But I think that's going to be around for a long time. And the good news is that every practice, I believe, that out of necessity is going to have to be on board with telemedicine as a way of doing business moving forward.
Okay, thanks. And Tom, what do you see?
Well, I'm looking at it from a broader area. I agree. It's time for telemedicine, and I hope the rules are put in place so that we can all do that from home if this pandemic occurs. But as we look at a post-COVID environment, so take into account, we've held 12 webinars to date, and we've brought in a number of experts. We've been keeping a running list of what things may look like on a post-COVID basis. And if you can look at the need for a healthcare worker, whether it's going to be somebody that's credentialed from a community college, which in my opinion are the crown jewels of our workforce training, but funding for biomedical research must be sustained and predictable as we move forward. Public health infrastructure is going to be essential, and that's a broad definition that's going to require a very active and well-trained workforce. Venture capital and funding is going to be critical for new products and new companies. And of course, those companies are going to be hiring new people, and the ability to create and manufacture in the state. Texas, I think, is primed to begin to recruit additional manufacturing facilities here in the state. Every area of our state is primed to be able to do that. And we always ask the question, if we bring in a large manufacturer, do we have the workforce that's capable to be able to supply those needs? 10 years ago, a decade ago, I would tell you that we weren't. I think today we are, basically with the ability for our community colleges to figure out what those needs are and to be able to create curriculum and train our workforce.
Okay, thank you. The next one, I want to focus a little bit more on training itself for Michael and Dwana. Social distancing has forced us to take advantage of teleconferencing technologies like we're doing right now. We've talked about telehealth too, but in the instructional sphere, what are some ways to maximize this training in a virtual space? And how do we accommodate hands-on training that can't really be duplicated in a virtual space? So I guess, Michael, if you'd like to start off.
Yeah, I would. One of the things that we do is, before partnering with our colleges, our college partners, is we partner with healthcare entities, and they look to us as a resource for the training that the medical practices need to sustain themselves, to be compliant, to be profitable. And telemedicine, not telemedicine, but the virtual training has been important because a lot of the times, as opposed to somebody enrolling on their own, our partnerships have led to greater participation in the virtual world because the hospital, we partner with Doctors Hospital at Renaissance, for example, the PHO there. If they don't mandate, they make accessible the kinds of classes that are going to lift those different practices up. And those are not classes that people can afford not to participate in. It's a very the medical practice is a very regulated environment, like so many industries, and medical practice staff cannot afford not to participate in these classes. So a lot of the times that we have the majority of times that we have these classes, they are prescribed by the actual healthcare entity for participation. So it helps to have a manager a manager of the practice on board for the necessity of the importance of the training. But for us, it's driven by the healthcare entity that pull the people into these classes for their own benefit.
Okay. Dewana, what about you?
I was going to say that, it's really critical that as we're teaching these classes that even though the virtual environment is meant to be flexible, these individuals moving into these fields have to be, part of a healthcare continuum. And so they still have to understand how to practice team-based approaches and critical thinking. And so we have to be able to use a variety of engaging technologies to provide them with that experience. We found this last semester that many of our students, particularly those in the 19 to 25 age group, really performed better and preferred the virtual environment over sitting in the classroom. They were more participatory. As part of that, though, I think you have to incorporate things that require them to be in the space together as opposed to just doing things singularly. Where the participation counts, whether that is some sort of competitive option or it's team-based work, where they have to focus on practicing those things that they will have to do when they're actually on their work site. We also just have to strengthen their ability to polish their types of digital literacy. That's a huge competency now. They need to be able to learn how, to do the actual software platforms, but also the, Zoom and Teams and any other way that they might need to communicate. So having them in that virtual environment, forces them sort of at this point to learn that, and it's going to, it's going to take them into the workforce with those skills. I would argue that from a laboratory skills practice standpoint, there are things that have to be face-to-face to produce the best end results. Even if you tell those students weeks in advance, this is the mandatory time that you have to be face-to-face, and we split those students up into segments and smaller groups, and then they come to campus with the plan to concentrate that amount of time solely on skills practice. And then we structure it the other way. But it just, they have to have the practice. There's just some things that are not transferable virtually in a reasonable manner for that student to walk away with the same strong skills that they could if they were doing it face-to-face.
Okay, thank you. And the next one touches a little bit on what Dewana just said, but this is for the whole panel, and so we'll go down the line with this. But considering the higher prevalence of a virtual learning environment, what challenges do you foresee for instructional accountability to ensure that medical certifications have the same value as they would from traditional face-to-face instruction? So let's start this time with Tom.
Well, I mean, let me just share with you that our communities that have the life sciences as part of their economic development growth agenda for their communities, they are out actively recruiting companies right now. And the first thing companies will ask is your workforce ready and able? And I think that's going to be key. The Bio International Convention was going to be held 2 weeks ago. They moved it to a virtual platform. We take a delegation there every year. We've been doing it literally for the last 12 to 15 years. It is, and this is a global convention, and it is one of the most highly visited pavilions because number one, it's the state of Texas. Number two, we take representatives from the governor's office, the Texas Workforce Commission. We also have representatives there from CPRIT, the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas. And we have a number of, and plus it's how we do business in the state of Texas. There's a high degree of interest in coming to Texas. Our workforce has to be top notch. And I think we are there, but it's an ever changing, particularly in a post-COVID environment. So we have to be ready, we have to train, and thank goodness for our community colleges. They are up to what we need to produce that workforce.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. King, why don't you go next?
Yes, in terms of holding students accountable in virtual training, I think in terms of what you would call, I guess, the theory portion or the classroom portion, I think there's platforms and tools out there that do that very well. I think colleges and universities and others have been using those for years. I think the biggest challenge is still when you get to the technical, the hands-on, the laboratory aspect. And so finding ways there to, rotate students in for that, schedule students for that, for those aspects, because things that might have been done in large group before under the current environment have to be done with distancing in mind and things like that. So I think, like I said, I think the theory level can be done very well. I think the practical, the skills, the hands-on, on-the-job training aspects, those are the ones that I think take more, more creativity, and they also it's also more costly because you're less efficient because you're having to deal one-on-one or with very small groups in situations or settings that you would have dealt with maybe somewhat larger groups in the past.
Michael, why don't you go next?
Well, I think the challenge, our particular classes are best held or have been best held in a group setting where people from an organization get together, they hear the same thing, they go through the same practice. It's a peer situation where people get to experience certification. When you have remote virtual type training, people are doing it pretty much on their own time, not when they're scheduled to be in the office. And so it can be a little difficult for people to get the same experience. But our thought is that the legitimacy of the certification, the power of the assessment, and the learning tools that we build into certifications help people be successful. But we're seeing people be successful, whether it's a certifying opportunity or in a live class setting.
Okay. And last but not least, Tawana, especially from a college standpoint, being one of the major training providers, tell us what you think on this.
Okay. And I wanted to reference in particular the parameters that have been set for the use of the COVID emergency money through skills. Just because a program could be pushed into a 90-day platform does not mean that it should be. And so I think we have to be really cognizant about what's reasonable in terms of the student being able to be successful and putting them at the forefront of that decision. If they can't amass the competencies that are required and then they enter the workforce and those skills are not where they need to be, then we basically have failed them. And so I think we've got to be really it's got to be assessed as to whether or not this is a program that we have that's already strong on a face-to-face basis, and can it be reasonably moved into that type of platform. If not, then I think you have to say it's not viable, and you have to look at those things that aren't viable. I think, we part of a community college's quest always is evaluation. And just as if we were doing this evaluation face-to-face on a semester or annual basis, I think we have to know what is happening in the classroom. Are the students passing the credentialing exams? If not, why aren't they passing them, and where are those gaps? And then what are our employers telling us about these students coming out of the virtual environment? What were the changes that occurred to them as part of their instruction, and did that create any gaps, not only that we didn't think about, but what's emerging in the workforce as a result of COVID that they need to be more inherently aware of. So those things have to be built into that, into that curriculum in order to that we have something that's well aligned with industry requirements.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time to address one more question before we get to the question answer session. And this actually addresses one of the questions that's come in. And this is going to be for the whole panel, but we see a lot of emerging technologies, medical and non-medical technologies. And I'm talking here of everything from virtual reality training to teleconferencing to personal devices that measure biometrics. Do you see a long-term need to integrate these developments into the healthcare sphere, into training and into practice, specifically the virtual reality, biometric readers, and the teleconferencing? If we kind of address that, and I guess Tom would be the best person to start off on this one.
But I think we were already focusing on those areas pre-COVID. And as we're moving into the heart of a pandemic, and as we're moving into a post-COVID, how do we analyze? How do we read? How do we treat? How do we test? I think all of these components and these innovations are going to be front and center as we move forward. It's critical. It's a very exciting time. It's a very horrific time that we're living in. But if we look at the opportunities of innovation moving forward, and then we look at the ability to train our workforce on those overlays moving forward, I think it's going to be a very exciting time for not only treating this current pandemic, but as we have learned, this is not the last pandemic we're going to be facing. There will be others coming down, and how do we prepare for that? And so there's a phrase that I picked up throughout the last 24 weeks, and they think, if you think research is expensive, try treating a pandemic. And I think that's where we are today, and then what are the tools that we're going to have that will be necessary to do that.
Okay, thank you. And I think next let's go to Michael. Specifically from a training standpoint, we do have a question about virtual reality training, but do you see a need for that, a move toward that direction? And also, what other new training technologies do you see on the forefront that we might start using as a result of COVID?
Well, I think it's really important right now that people have access to the kinds of computers and things and so on to allow them to participate. Because right now, the only way they're going to get training is to do it virtually. I think it's really important that organizations rally behind the people that they serve and provide access to those kinds of programs. I think technology with regard to virtual training is here to stay, regardless of whether or not the pandemic goes away or if it lasts, for however long it's going to last. It's going to be a part of what we do moving forward. And organizations, physician practices might find that they are able to be actually more productive and more successful with those kinds of training scenarios and outlets put into place.
Okay, thanks. And then I think, Dawana, if you would kind of let us know, what are some of the barriers to introducing new training technologies? Like we talked about virtual reality, teleconferencing. What are some of the challenges you see, and how do we address those from an instructional standpoint?
I think the biggest thing is that, particularly in our college region, most of the land space, as it were, is considered to be rural. And so we still have, as the commissioner referenced, a large digital divide where people, if they're working from home, they don't have the technology available, or they don't have the funds to purchase that. And so I know on our end, adult education is under my arena as well. And so we've used some of our capacity building money to purchase that equipment to be able to loan to students so that they can gainfully participate in the activities. And then, done stuff like purchase subscriptions and such as that allow us to, beam that into somebody's home. So I think, we've looked for solutions for people individually that don't have access to stuff, with building partnerships with Texas Workforce Commission, who may have equipment or may have, opportunities. I know even Texoma Council of Governments was offering some of our students to pay for their actual internet. And so, whether it ranges from not having the equipment to not having the ability to pay, we've just had to look for options to help those students be able to make the connection.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. King, I'd like, if you would, right quick, to address from the standpoint of new technologies, specifically we talked about earlier, biometric readers that we carry around in light of teleconferencing. Do you see a need to train and upskill current medical workers, healthcare workers, to use those technologies while we're teleconferencing?
Yes, I think that definitely the need for those, and having more of that type of equipment, available so that they can be, measuring specific, biometrics to feedback information for the teleconferencing. But also on top of that, I think technicians to service those kind of devices. I think one of the areas it's challenging is having technicians available locally, regionally, and so forth to service all of the equipment that a hospital currently has. Not to mention if all of these different biometric devices are going to be, added and so forth. I think that would be there. And I do want to just mention, real quickly, fundamentally, one thing we need to not forget with all the modern stuff like biometric devices is for decades we've had a shortage of nurses. That is really pushing to potentially could be a crisis point if this keeps on going. And if we don't learn from this, that at all levels we need to really dig in and build up that nursing pipeline. It's been a problem for years, and it could really hurt us really, really bad if this continues or accelerates even more.
Okay, thank you. And we had one more question come in, and I think this one's best suited to Dr. King and Tom. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the major short-term needs in training for the industry? Tom, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and start off on this. What major short-term training needs do you see?
I would say as we move forward, it's going to be in the testing arena, and from our phlebotomists to our blood and plasma centers and how we adequately staff. It actually is on two realms. As we continue to grow the life science industry, do we have enough seasoned CEOs to be able to pull together the teams? That's an area that's worthy of exploring. But looking at our trained folks that can come out of a community college environment, it's the testing aspect, in our opinion, is what we have been hearing over the last 24 weeks.
Okay. Michael, would you like to address this?
I'm going to pass on this one.
Okay. Dr. King, what about you? What do you see as one of the major short-term training needs in the industry?
I mean, I would agree on the testing to begin with, and then the other area I think that's needed both in training and everything is kind of mid-level people to support the frontline healthcare providers. So talking about in terms of people that can do the follow-up and the connecting, whether they be health coaches, navigators, coordinators. There's a lot of need to follow up with patients. The doctors and so forth and hospitals are being pushed to the limit. There's need to do follow-up, with patients to make sure that, that they're following everything that they should follow, that they understood the instructions that they got, feedback what results are back to the provider and so forth, to take some of the burden off the provider so they can address the situation right at hand that's coming to their doorstep every day.
Okay. And Dewana, I know your COVID initiative SDF grants dealt with this specifically. Would you mind kind of chiming in on this?
Right. The way that we approach this, and then the way I see it moving forward in future skill development grants, is that we want to train people at that, at that starting level, and the patient care techs, the phlebotomists, the CNAs, but really looking at what are the huge demands in your area, what are on the demand occupation list for your region, and getting those people trained. But you also want to look at what those individuals are bringing into the workforce as transferable skills when they take that initial job. So if they're doing phlebotomy, then that is a massive skill that they also have to have, that they already have mastered if they then move into a pathway of LVN or RN. If they're in pharmacy tech, they're taking that pharmacological math knowledge into the nursing arena with them, which it really gives them a leg up as a step in to whatever their next arena is. And so as Dr. King noted, we need to get ready to fill all of these positions for nurses, or we're going to be in a crisis situation. And so building it up so that these individuals can start in that movement of starting on a ladder and then moving into the next arena. I don't want to train somebody for something that has zero portability or zero promotability. So, if it's
We lost you for about, I want to say 5 or 6 seconds there, Dewana. Can you repeat the last bit of what you said? Can you hear us? I guess we might have lost a connection there. Okay. Uh, last but not least, and I think this one's probably best suited for Dr. King, at least to begin with. What medical role do you see? Because we talked about baseline training to get someone into a kind of a reskilling role. But what do you see as the role in most need of upskilling in the medical sector right now?
I think kind of what she was just talking about. I think like the medical assistants, the patient care techs, the LVNs, I think upskilling those. I think there's a need for more kind of fast track bridge programs for people that already are, in the patient care field to upskill them, to fill in more RN positions on a faster track. I know UTRGV here, for example, has a 1-year program for people that have college degrees and so forth. But there needs to be more thinking about people that already have, let's say, a good amount of skills based on their current role, their current training, their education, and how to build faster tracks, but really even more so broaden the pipeline, because we need quantity, we need quality. Obviously, we need to maintain quantity, but we need quality in terms of RNs and in terms of really all those who provide the bedside care.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. Well, that kind of wraps up our discussion, but I'd like to get just closing thoughts from each of our panelists, if we could, right quick. Just some quick closing thoughts. Anything you think we might have missed and you'd like to address. Dewan, are you still on?
Do I have a speaker again now?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the notations I made is that, as we're identifying the jobs that are available right now, we want to be really precautious about overtraining in those areas so that we don't saturate the market, because ultimately the end goal is to find that person a job. So if we have trained too many, then we're not going to be able to find them jobs in field of study. And so I think that is that's going to be particularly important for us to think about. And then, somebody had noted before, really looking at during the next 6 months to a year, what are the emerging occupations that are happening that we need to look at, setting down with industry and figuring out what the skills and competencies are for those, and then getting them built quickly so that we can amass those. We're not really given the opportunity at this point to be proactive about things. And so we have to be as reactive as quickly as we can to, these are the new things that we're seeing, and get them out there for people to get trained in.
Okay, thanks. Michael, would you like to go next for just some closing thoughts right quick?
Yeah, I just like to say that, people working with the medical practice setting, regardless of whether they're working at the front desk, if they're coders, billers, and everyone in between, they need access to training right that actually is certainly changing because of the COVID pandemic. And so we are able to bring that kind of training to medical practices, and especially with our college partners. We've been able to build bundles of training that allow physicians and their staffs to be aware right now of what's changing with regard to compliance and how to stay afloat with regard to billing and coding and so on. So it's important that even though everybody's looking long term and so on, physician practices are being affected right now in all phases of operation because of the pandemic. And so it's important to make sure they have access to training that's gonna take care of their immediate training needs, as well as for the long term. And what we do really, it's about the stuff that they need on a daily basis. That is long term, but we need to keep an eye on the stuff that they're needing next week in order to keep their doors open.
Thanks. Okay. Dr. King, would you like to go next? Just some closing thoughts right quick.
Yes, I think this can be an exciting time. There's, if we take advantage of what we've learned from this time. So, for example, our area of the state, like many areas in the state and country, is very underserved medically, and there's not enough doctors. There's not enough. But if we can build on what we've learned with telehealth and get the help from both at the state and national level in terms of making sure that it's understood that doing telehealth right, that the cost is there. What we need, the doctors can be much more efficient and have a better experience and serve many more patients. But what's needed is coordinators and navigators, and then kind of telehealth technicians, so the doctor can focus 100% of their time and attention, giving quality care to the patient, and the other support being there. So I think there's a whole potential for some career areas to kind of grow and expand, and so that we can be more creative about, how do we meet the needs of an underserved area and have, high quality care.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Tom, some quick closing thoughts, if you would, please.
So, let me just share with you some statistics, because I think that we are really post-COVID going to be in an era of harmonic convergence in terms of what the state has made investments in terms of where we are with our education system as we're moving forward. But BIO just released a report, which I'll share with you and make it available to, you can make it available to our listeners. And they looked at all 50 states. And let me tell you some of the areas where we are in the top quintile across the country. First of all, our growth rate, 11.5% on the life science industry. Texas is among the top tier states, not only in the size of its industry, but in several key measures of the industry's innovation ecosystem. Academic R&D expenditures, which is basically research. NIH funding is at all-time high levels. Venture capital investments to fund our young companies. And patent awards, 4,950. And then, of course, a number of clinical trials that we have. This innovative system is going to produce some amazing results in a post-COVID environment, not only to deal with this pandemic, but with future pandemics. What's going to fuel it is going to be our workforce. And I have full confidence in terms of our 50 community college districts to be able to supply that need in terms of our 37 public four-year universities, our 8 tier 1 research university systems, our 10 public health institutions. Texas is in a position to be able to meet the needs and demands of the future, to not only meet this pandemic needs, but future pandemics, and continue to take care of Texans.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, that's the end of our moderated discussions. I would like to invite our listeners to keep in contact with your outreach representatives with any questions or concerns you have moving forward with training. Looks like we're right on time, so I'm going to turn the floor over to Dale Robertson, the Interim Director of the Office of Employer Initiatives, for some closing thoughts. Dale?
All right. Thank you, Seth, very much. Good job. And thank you to all the panelists, starting with, of course, Commissioner representing Labor, Commissioner Julio Alvarez, for joining us today. Tom, always good to see you, Tom Kowalski, and very innovative information that you shared with us about the bioscience and life sciences industry. I think we don't know enough about it, and what you shed some light on today tells us that we need to go look more at the opportunity that's there across Texas. I'm really glad you're here today. And Dr. King, thank you for representing what's going on in the Valley, but also in a way, speaking largely about what's going on in healthcare in general, the growth that's taking care in healthcare. You mentioned several things about the different kinds of jobs that are available. DHR has been a great partner of ours here at the state level through skills development, and that reflected in your conversation about where the needs are and the type of training. And of course, Michael, we see you guys all the time across the board and working with different colleges, and we wanted you here today because of the work that you're doing with some of the practices across the state. So many small doctors' offices that fit our small business criteria are participating in training. A lot of healthcare, coding, telehealth, and so forth. So that's great. And your perspective today, I think, helped broaden the conversation to look at those practices across the state and see how can we help in upskilling. And of course, DeWanna, your work at Grayson College, I mean, you've worked with some of the larger healthcare systems. I do see your challenge in terms of working with for the long term. I mean, that's a really critical point, that we want to make sure that we continue to create and develop the workforce that's going to meet the long-term needs of our state and help people obtain skills that allow them to be portable and industry recognized, et cetera. So you guys are doing a great job there. With this skills COVID-19 pandemic, and with the commissioners, you heard from Commissioner Alvarez today. Last week or 2 weeks ago on our conference call, our webinar, we heard from the Chair Brian Daniels, talking about this need in the next forum series we have, we'll also have Commissioner Demerson. And it highlights the fact that our agency, led by commissioners and also by Mr. Ed Cerner, our executive director, see how critical this time is for us and for our state, for the economy of Texas, for us to be listening to industry, joining with and understanding what their needs are for their workforce development, and being flexible, malleable, and providing that kind of training just in time. COVID-19 has brought up some new challenges in how we deliver training and what types of training are needed. It's also highlighted some of the jobs that we didn't know existed before. Someone asked about contact traces in the chat. Yes, contact traces. We may have heard of it, but we didn't really think that was a great need until now. You know, healthcare negotiators, you know, those folks, telehealth, telemedicine, it's been there, but now we all know it's really needed. So our colleges, our workforce boards, and I'd like to acknowledge the workforce boards who are participating here today as well, have all worked to adapt training and do things in such a way that meets industry needs. So we want to thank you guys for doing that and sharing your information with us today. I want to thank Seth for doing a great job, Thomas for the introduction, for Dolores Stacy, who's in the background, who's helped set this up and getting the word out. Also want to thank Muriel Borders, who's here. She's also a member of the team on the Business and Industry Partnership, and all of the team that worked to support this initiative as we continue to work on ways that we can partner with industry, partner with training providers, and figure out how we can do upskilling, reskilling in a much better, a different way than we had done previously, meeting these new challenges. I think as Tom pointed out, you know, Texas is in that top quintile for so many areas, top 10, top 5. I mean, this is because we do collaborate and work together, as Commissioner Alvarez had pointed out earlier. I think also I'd like to thank Julia and her team, Julia Mercado, and her team for their support coming from our Communications and Media Relations Department, and Tom McCarty, her director of that division. They've been great in supporting this initiative and making sure that we are able to use this platform as well as we have so far. So thank you very much for joining us today. And of course, I can't leave without thanking our audience, all of you who've joined today and spent some time listening to this conversation and adding questions to the discussion. We invite you to join us again in 2 weeks on July 14th, when we focus on, also at 2 p.m., we'll focus at that point on hospitality and retail and e-commerce. You know, again, we're looking at industries that are facing challenges at this time, and how best do we meet their needs? And how do we prepare our workforce, the existing and the new workforce? So again, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for our panelists. Thank you, Commissioner Alvarez. And I'll turn it back to you, Seth.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of our webinar today. So have a great day. Again, contact your representative with any questions you might have. We're happy to answer them. That's what we're here for. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.